Without any further ado, I'd like to hop right back into to the agenda. We have our next panel, which I'm very excited to introduce. Quick introductions to the panelists, and then we'll have a further introduction to the moderator. So the moderator, Dr. Steve Omick, who is the CEO of Riverside Research. Joining for the panel for Reflecting on SAR, we have Gabe Dominocielo, who's the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Umbra. We have Amy Hopkins, the vice president and general manager of Capella Space, and Eric Jensen, the president of ICEYE US. So please give a hand in welcoming our panelists here. While we get everybody comfortable here, let me give a formal introduction to Dr. Omick. Dr. Steve Omick is president and CEO of Riverside Research with over 28 years of research and executive leadership experience in the private sector and defense intelligence industries. Prior to joining Riverside Research, Dr. Omick was president of Applied Communications Sciences, ASS. Prior to that, was president and CEO of Rincon Research Incorporated, RRC. So without any further ado, Dr. Omick, turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody to GEOINT Foreword 2022. Very happy to be here and happy to be moderating this panel today. Today's conversation is on the evolution of commercial SAR and SAR products in the national security community. My background is in national security and specifically in the intelligence community. And the National Reconnaissance Organization was founded about the time I was born. It was unacknowledged until I was actively working in the community and had been for many years. Today, the National Reconnaissance Organization, NGA, the entire intelligence community is embracing commercial GEOINT platforms in a way that I never thought I would see. It really is amazing, and I'm really happy to be here today to talk about how these commercial partners are making a huge difference in national security. As of this time, there are in the neighborhood of 40 commercial GEOINT constellations that comprise over 600 satellites. In next several years, that by a lot of projections, that will grow to over 130 constellations with more than 4,500 satellites on orbit. These will provide revisit times in seconds and minutes versus hours and days. It is truly a transformational time with the confluence of commercial and national security. So with that, I want to talk about a couple of ground rules today for the conversation. These are going to be general discussions, not really specifically about the companies involved, but about the thought leadership that the three panelists here provide in this important arena. We're not going to talk about specific government contracts, although we will be talking about national security and how commercial companies impact that. We're not going to talk about Ukraine either. And finally, nobody's allowed to laugh if I ask ill-formed questions about synthetic aperture radar. When I did technical work in the national security community, it was in SIGINT. We talked about wavelengths that were this long, not this long. So I'm going to learn a lot today. I hope it's going to be informative to you as well. And to start things off, I'm going to turn it over to each of our panelists to introduce themselves and talk a little bit about themselves and their background. Well, I'll start out with you, Gabe.
Thank you. My name is Gabe Dominocielo. I am the co-founder and chief strategy officer of Umbra. We're a small, sleepy synthetic aperture radar company. We have 2 satellites in space. My background has nothing to do with the GEOINT and the space industry. My background actually was in plaintiff's litigation for 10 years until my best friend told me that he had a novel invention for a radar satellite, and we started the company together about 7 years ago.
Excellent, excellent. Welcome to the panel. Amy.
Hi, my name is Amy Hopkins. I'm the Vice President and General Manager with Capella Space. So my background is I had a, let's call it a life sentence in the Department of Defense as a civilian intelligence officer that was thankfully commuted. And I was able to then join the national defense industry world, worked with both the Boeing Company and Northrop Grumman, have always been exposed to and used SAR throughout all of my career. So when the opportunity came to work with a company like this, I jumped at the chance to be able to bring SAR out from behind the skiff door, as I like to say, into the unclassified world.
Excellent. Welcome, welcome. And finally, Eric.
Thanks. Great to be here. Eric Jensen, President of ICEYE US. Love this conference. This is our Super Bowl. Day one is tough. It's on a Sunday, but delighted to see all of you here in the audience. One thing that unites us as an industry is our perpetual quest for better decision making. And one thing I love about this conference is getting to speak with all of you on the diverse approaches that you're taking to make that happen. I think one way that we're all contributing to that is through our SAR constellations, which enable more accurate, reliable, rapid insights, the likes of which haven't been available to the industry to date. And so really excited about our panel just to talk through where we're all at.
Very good. Thank you. I'm going to start today with a question for each of the panelists, starting with Gabe and working across the room. And then after that, I have several other questions that I'll pose to the entire panel. And also, any of you who have questions, please feel free to submit them as we go along. And hopefully we can include them in the conversation as well. To submit your questions, you enter on the web at pollev.com/USGIF or a text to USGIF to 22333. So with that, Gabe, commercial SAR brings important new capabilities. That said, why is it often seen as the go-to sensor only when it is dark or cloud covered?
Well, that's because most people don't know about SAR. SAR is like the perfect measurement. So I think a lot of people think about SAR as the imagery, but the reality is it is a perfect measurement from space. That can tell you a variety of different things, like using interferometry, you can see down to a human footstep in grass. Using vibometry, you can see if an air conditioning unit is vibrating. SAR is perfect. So I argue that it's good for any weather, anytime, any day, if you care about the insights in the data.
Very good. So you're a proponent that it should be the go-to sensor.
It should be the go-to sensor. I don't know why it isn't. It is the best phenomenology out there. I'm a zealot.
Very good. Certainly sounds like it. Okay, moving across. Amy, what challenges exist in working with the national security community that don't exist with commercial customers and vice versa?
I would say the biggest challenge I have seen, it's the same challenge I saw with the advent of commercial EO. I remember, and we won't say how many decades ago this was, but the first time we brought commercial EO into the intelligence community, into meetings that the joint staff were having, and the first response they had was, this can't possibly be unclassified. We need to lock this up. You mean I can leave with this? I can walk out with this? And I'm seeing the same thing play out with commercial SAR. When I'm in meetings with anyone across the national security spectrum, the first response is, oh my gosh, I cannot believe this is unclassified. I feel they have this need to want to go and lock it up in a safe. So that's one of the biggest challenges that I see with the national security community that we don't really see on the commercial side. If we're working with agriculture or insurance, they've never had to work in the classified realm before. So that would be one of the key differences that I see between working with the commercial world and the national security apparatus.
Very good, very good. Thank you, thank you. And finally, Eric, question for you. SAR is still a relatively new technology across all imaging platforms. Those platforms include panchromatic, multispectral, hyperspectral, SAR, short, medium, long wave, infrared. Where does SAR fit into that ecosystem, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it also highlights a little bit of a misnomer. I mean, SAR actually is not new. In fact, the first application of SAR, which was based on kind of physicists in academia and laboratories, was back in the early 20th century. And the first real use of it was to detect ships. It wasn't to do what we can do today, of course, in terms of ship detection, but we're talking like 1904. German physicists are using SAR to figure out, is there a big metal object out there in front of my vessel as I'm going across whatever waterway. It became more popularized in kind of the mid-20th century when several countries were investing in it heavily and typically in secrecy. And that really, I think, is one of the reasons why it feels like it's a new thing, because SAR has really kind of gone out from behind the wall, so to speak, in a more mainstream way as of the last several years. But there are companies that have been operating commercial SAR systems for decades, and they build amazing systems that are super capable. I think the thing that we're seeing now with the advent of commercial SAR constellations is the miniaturization of these capabilities that can still perform at a level that was only possible with prior, decades, like technology that was developed decades in a prior period. So, I think the cool thing about where it fits in the ecosystem, I love how bold you were, Gabe, about it being kind of the be-all, end-all thing. I think that my perspective is SAR is a complementary tool to what else is out there, and the important thing to remember about it is that it's different. And those differences, the richness of the data, is what allows for a level of exploitation, both commercial and government mission focused. That's super cool, different, and we're all excited about it.
That's good. I love that comment you made about it being complementary to the other imaging platforms that are out there in the remote sensing community. I feel like one of the powers of all of the different commercial platforms is the combination of all of them into better and better understanding of what's going on in the world. So thank you for that. The next question I'll throw out here and let all of you sort of talk to. Are there any killer apps yet in the commercial market for this generation of SAR? As you're coming online, some of you have had satellites on orbit for several years, some more recently. What are you looking at in terms of the killer applications that help the SAR community, commercial SAR community, move forward? Start with anybody who wants.
I'd say, personally, I think it's the automatic detection applications that are there, whether it's automatic ship detection, plane detection. Because of as Gabe has mentioned, the density of the data that is there, there is so much information in there. I laugh. If you actually close your eyes and just let the data talk to you and not look just for the image, there's so much in that data, and we're beginning to see these applications that are there, specifically, as I mentioned, the automatic detection of certain things that we know are of interest to our customers.
Eric, Gabe, any comments?
Yeah, it's a great, I think the industry's been searching for, the killer app, just like physicists have been looking for the, grand unification theory for decades. And the great thing about the grand unification theory is that there's like 4 different versions of the grand unification theory. And I think the same kind of ethos applies here. Like, there's not really one application to rule them all. The great thing about having the ubiquity of SAR via constellations is that you can do much more frequent assessment of change on Earth in lots of different domains. And that allows you to not only build kind of a pattern of activity, but also to get to a predictive level of assessment, where you're actually kind of you're finding leading indicators for things that are happening. And that can apply to climate change as well as it can apply to any kind of defense-related application. The cool thing about SAR, as Gabe mentioned, like, the sensor itself has millimeter-level precision in the ground plane. And that's, again, a different dimension for us all to consider as a community on how we use this with higher temporal resolution based on the ubiquity of satellites that are up there. So I don't think there's one killer application. I think there's a killer capability that we're seeing come to fruition for the industry to take advantage of and then use that to find answers to hard problems in different mission domains.
Good, thank you. Gabe?
So I really like what you guys said. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think that there's a fundamental problem in the industry, which is we need to provide more data. If you think about getting an app, you have to have a lot of product for that app. So my thought process is, and we've seen this across the industry over the last few years, if you increase the quality of something, the market tends to expand. If you reduce the price of something, the market tends to expand. If you can do both, the market tends to expand exponentially. So when we all go and work with young people and give free data sets, which Capella's been doing, you're giving much more people access to data. ICEYE has also done it. You're giving much more people access to data, which is a way to expand the market, where you're going to find apps that no one in this room has ever conceived of. And I can go through and tell funny stories about customers, I don't know, measuring the output of a crypto mine. But the reality is the best apps, we have no idea what they are. But like these companies are creating like generations of entrepreneurs through the data sets that are being released. And it's very exciting to be up here with them.
And I think those apps are going to be evolving as other phenomenologies, as we talked earlier, Eric, about being complementary to other phenomenologies that are in the remote sensing community and bringing all of those together to have fuller intelligence products. There's a related question that came in from the audience, which is, I'll throw out to any of you who might be able to answer this. What are the best and most critical open source Python and R packages used for analyzing SAR data? A little bit in line there with that application question. Does anybody have any? That's an in-the-weeds question for you all.
Pretty in the weeds.
It is. I don't have the right background answer, but I'll just say that there's a lot of data that's available for free from all of our companies that you can use to start fueling your assessment of what you could do with SAR. There's places like GitHub, excuse me. There's other things that, like, for example, websites that NGA maintains that has tools for assessing SAR data sets and figuring out what to do with them. There's open source things like SAR-pros and other elements like that you can get out there and use and start to investigate. And that just, again, harkens back to like another question I think we might get to, which is why does SAR feel new? What's the difference with it, EO versus SAR, which is kind of a good segue topic. I think that I saw this shirt at GEOINT last year that said, and I need to make one of these. It said, EO is for humans, SAR is for machines. It's like one of those things you see at Comic-Con or something, right? And I love that shirt because that's the truth. I mean, if I take a high-res EO image of a beautiful beach and I show it to my cousin, they're gonna go, this is the thing that came off the sensor is super cool, and I understand it. If I give you a SAR data set in the slant plane and I say, hey, do some math and then call me in the morning, I'm not gonna get the same reaction. So the richness of the data set also is accompanied by a level of complexity that's not intuitive, but I think that because of the way that our companies and others are pushing the envelope on making SAR more readily available, the industry's starting to realize that actually this is something that we can get our arms around and start to use and develop applications around. And that's really that training and kind of development ecosystem that's now we're seeing on the rise is awesome to watch.
Very good, very good. Thank you for that. Let me ask a related question and take it up just a little bit of a level of the maybe software languages, and ask: does SAR have any unique advantages when considering AI and ML? In our community, at least, AI ML has become one of those generational catchphrases. People are putting a lot of money into it. There's a lot of activity in the artificial intelligence and machine learning world. How do you guys think about on the processing side, on the this idea that EO is fairly obvious for people to think about, but SAR takes, you can't look at a SAR image and necessarily see right away what's going on. How does AI ML play into this? And I'll throw it open to any of you.
I've got a great answer for this. So I remember that in the early days, it was like, it's probably a lot easier to count a car in a parking lot with a 1 meter radar image than a 1 meter optical image. And if you go one layer deeper, MIT Lincoln Lab had a really interesting paper, and they were using a very, very simple machine learning algorithm, and I'll make sure the paper's on the internet so you can find it, where it was looking at it was looking at tanks, and They were able, with 1 meter, to identify that it was a tank like 50% of the time, something like that. I don't remember the exact number. They dropped the resolution down to 50 centimeters. They were able to identify the tank like 96% of the time. So it's not linear. It's exponential in terms of quality, and it's exponential in terms of what a machine can do with this kind of data.
Amy? Eric?
I just echo the, EO is for humans and SAR is for machines.
I love it.
I'm totally stealing that. I'm going to make a t-shirt. That's what I always have said. If you close your eyes, the data will talk to you. And this is, back to even the earlier question on the apps, we have no idea what is going to be possible yet. But I can see a future where there are things we never even dreamed possible being used with this data.
The good news is that there's a lot of people who are in this room that are a lot smarter than us when it comes to AI and ML. Like we're considering kind of this cliche term that like people generally think of as computers doing something with the data. I think generally speaking, it's not that SAR makes machine learning easier versus EO or any other data set. Like if you're building a neural network, you still need like hundreds, if not thousands of samples of whatever that data source is in order to train a model to go investigate something or detect that something's happening. You need thousands of chips in a panchromatic picture taken from an EO spacecraft of a vessel, the same vessel over and over and over again from different angles to train a computer to detect that vessel is indeed the one or the type and that it's going in the direction that you think it's going. The same is still true of other data sets. The difference is that with SAR, you're talking about pulses. With EO, you're talking about pixels. And a pulse, by definition, it has phase and amplitude, and it's an electromagnetic wave. So there's a lot more data, I would argue, that is embedded in kind of the core building block element of a SAR image, because it's an instrument. It's a scientific instrument at the end of the day. And so unpacking that can seem daunting, but fueling a different approach to machine learning and eventually something that approaches AI in the future, I think, is what we're all seeing happening in discussion with our customers. So it's, again, super exciting time.
Very good, very good. Thank you. Another question from the audience, and thank you for these. Do you find it more important to deliver SAR data into existing government platforms or to extract information from the data and deliver this instead?
I'll start. So we have a different business model. We are totally focused on delivering data. And I don't want to compete with these guys on the insights. We're just kind of we are a bent pipe for data.
Okay.
But we deliver to the government, we deliver to commercial customers, programmatically.
I don't see an either or. We are delivering data. Yes.
Yeah, we'll do whatever you want. We're here for you.
Yeah.
I think it's the same for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
I think the temptation is to, as operators, and that could be in any domain, is to look at the data sets that we all have and try to figure out what could we cultivate from that is a killer app or something that's unique, and then build a go-to-market strategy around that thing. And the temptation is to focus on something that seems very difficult and then somehow broadly applicable and scalable, and that investment is going to pay off with some massive ROI in the end. And I think what the industry's taught all of us is that that's actually a really difficult problem. It's a kind of multi-dimensional challenge that requires not just one data set to solve. Like if you're a simple question, it could be something as simple as like, when is the iceberg going to break off? And you could choose to use SAR to answer that question. You could choose to use lots of different types of data sets. But if you invested correctly to build an algorithm and a platform and an application to answer that one question, as businesses, we have to ask ourselves, what's the return on our investment? Are there lots of folks who want to know that?
Right.
What would it actually take us to invest and have that answer be high confidence, repeatable, something that someone could depend on over and over and over again? And I think that it's a non-trivial question to try to answer. So when I think about like the value chain, so you got raw data coming off the sensor, you can deliver images, like in our case, you can then deliver, let's call it data derivatives, which would be the image plus something else. So it could be identifying change, red is fled, blue is new type thing, and then deliver that to somebody as a product. Or you can kind of go to the end state and deliver an answer. I look at kind of our role is to try to take some of the pain of the lower portion of that value chain off the table of some of our customers who've had to invest heavily just to get to like the level of seeding their workflow and making it more rapid. If we can kind of just go from data to like 1 or 2 steps further and focus on making that much more easy and tangible and having a starting point that's dependable, reliable, and still commercially based, I think that levels us all up as an industry. And then we're not all kind of chasing our tails to try to solve like one specific application based on one phenomenology. So I think it definitely takes a village, and that's the cool thing about this conference, that we get to, again, talk with everybody about their approaches to these things.
Very good, thank you for that. Another question that now maybe looking forward a little bit, whether you're bent pipe or not, you have customers, commercial, national security customers that you have to think about where they're headed and what their desires are. What are the use cases driving the next generation of SAR constellations? Amy, do you want to start with that one?
The use cases are limitless. I think one of the things that intrigues me, just because of my background in the intelligence community, growing up as a self-proclaimed SAR evangelist, is this whole idea of a day in the life. What does a day in the life mean as we are monitoring potential adversaries in order to provide the commander on the ground or our national decision makers with time that they need to make the best decision possible. Up until now, we've had snippets into the, watching and looking, and there's hours, if not days, of gaps in time. With the advent now of all of these constellations that we have, now we actually can start to truly understand what the day in the life means. And the significance of that is, once I understand what the day in the life, what normal looks like, I can more quickly understand what not normal looks like. And by doing that, again, time. It's all about giving our decision makers, giving the warfighter, giving the decision maker, again, and I'm looking more on a national security perspective, time. The more time they have, the more apt we are to make the best decisions possible.
Perfect, thank you. Eric, Gabe, any other comments
I like
on
Amy's
use cases?
answer so much.
Okay.
Just leave it there.
Eric, anything on future use cases?
Let's see. So again, something that uniquely, I think, applies to SAR, and again, given the ubiquity of the constellations that are out there now, I think use cases around natural resources and energy, climate change, climate security, just to add to what you said, Amy, I think are kind of a ripe area for SAR to kind of grow into and influence more. There's companies that are now fusing SAR data sets with other kind of open source data sets that are out there just to monitor things, again, in a preemptive way around flooding and around coastal erosion and how are things changing, and actually anything from that to then layering on top of that something like port monitoring. So you've got a site, you've got a port, you've got weather happening, you've got SAR that of course is impervious to weather. It's looking at these ports all day and all night. We've got this situation right now outside Shanghai with all these ships that are kind of backed up. Same thing happened in west of LA last year during the pandemic. And so having a kind of system that persistently monitors that and then fuses that together with other data sources to preempt or predictively assess what could the implications of this be in lots of different domains. I think that's just possible now.
Right.
We weren't even able to have that conversation before kind of the advent of these type of constellations. So I think that's a new thing.
Yeah, one of the things I've been exposed to since working now in the commercial world with SAR is this idea of working with people like volcanologists who've never been able to see inside an actively erupting volcano. Can you imagine what we could do if, with the data that they are now able to obtain, again, back to, could we become predictive? Imagine the lives that could be saved across all of these applications. Again, it's limitless.
Yeah. Well, yeah, what are the use cases of omniscience? Having an ability to, like, we're here at GEOINT, right?
Right.
If we are fusing these kinds of data together, which is SAR and RF and NEO and everything, if you're fusing it together, and as you said, I mean, how many satellites in the next 5 years? You know, you're getting very, very close to kind of predictive information. And what do you do with that level of information and that level of access? But the key really is bringing the prices down. Because right now, our market is constrained by the people who can pay for the data. If we can, and this will happen naturally with the wider proliferation of radar satellites and EO and everything, if you start lowering the price, like I know at $10,000, you're gonna get a certain set of customers. At $5,000, like what happens at $20? Like $20, you're seeing a massive change in the market. And as long as you can make that data accessible in a permissive way, I think that you could really see a fundamental change in how every business uses geospatial intelligence.
Perfect. We talked a little bit about climate change and sort of a use case in the future. I wanted to just touch on that. Climate change is a national security issue, obviously, as well, and SAR has a role in that now as well. Can any of you or all of you comment just on that particular topic of climate change as it regards your SAR platforms?
Definitely with the actively monitoring ice movements, what's happening, the increase in being able to help and support the folks whose responsibility it is to obtain that type of information, to make those types of decisions, to again, help be more predictive. It all comes back to this idea of this predictive concept of being able to have this kind of data for climate change. So then what can we do to now prevent what we see happening? And for me, one of the first things, again, that jumps out is the active monitoring of the ice and the movements of the ice that are happening on the polar caps.
Yeah, so I think on the predictive side, or let's just say you're developing an awareness, a knowledge base of the way things are, and that relates to lots of different things in climate security, ice being one of them, and that could be for not only like shipping through the Bering Strait, for example, but also just erosion of ice caps and figuring out what that implications of that on climate change, generally speaking, are. There's also lots of other things like just sea state, understanding, like SAR is amazing at, again, detecting differences in the ground plane. So looking at tidal, the way that tides are changing over time and figuring out what the state is of different bodies of water, if ships are going to be passing through them or not. There's just looking at waterway hazards, again, kind of a generic thing. But again, these can all be predictive. Let's think about like flood season in the southeast, for example. You've got a period of time where there's typical hurricanes that come on, and you need to, in order to develop a baseline of understanding, it'd be great if you had a lot of SAR satellites to image the tributaries, the rivers, the Gulf, and figure out, okay, what is the current nominal state on a week-to-week basis? And then if we start to see some indicators of things changing, obviously if there's a hurricane, typically we know where it is, but even in advance of that, we start to see indicators of things changing. Where can that data go? Who can it go to? How can they use that to support preparations and then responses after the fact? So there's those cases, I think, that are now being fueled more specifically by SAR and the persistence of SAR and the frequency with which SAR satellites collect data. So on the other side, so you got predictive, but then on the reactive side, it's one thing that SAR is just excellent at because it's not impacted by, of course, weather and nighttime. So there's been cases where we've had oil spill outside of a refinery, and one of our government customers called us up on like a Friday night at 6 p.m. East Coast time and said, hey, our partners down in this region, they can't figure out where the oil went. It's floated away, tides have shifted, they've got the Navy out there looking for it, their local Navy looking for it. Can you help us figure out where it went? And so we were able to respond within several hours and determine, oil on water is something that SAR is very good at identifying, so determine where that is and where it was going, and then essentially give kind of that insight in near real time to the folks who could go find it, take out the right crews, contain it, that kind of thing. So it's really everything from the kind of the generic climate change questions down to kind of the very specific acute problems that happen that SAR can apply to.
Yeah.
I also think the bad actor aspect as well, the folks who are exacerbating the problem with things like illegal deforestation that up until this point have been operating with almost impunity, and now we can identify where that is happening and be able to direct the folks who can take action against these types of bad actors who are exacerbating the climate problem.
Yeah, I think that I'll use a fun use case. My best friend's a farmer, and if he's an orange farmer, if you think of like a hurricane's going to hit Florida, having information before, during, and after is like critical for your insurance. So SAR is the only phenomenology that can take those readings before the hurricane, look at the crop density, during the hurricane, understand what's happening, and then after to assess damage. And that can be done at a global scale. Like, it is very hard for insurance companies to roll rubber globally across a huge portfolio. But space can take a perfect measurement in high resolution where you can get those insights for a fairly low cost relative to sending an actuarial team to assess hurricane damage. It's just throw out one fun app.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Thank you so much. I'm going to try, we've got a few minutes here left. I'm going to try and combine a couple of questions. One from the audience that says, what does a constellation physically consist of? Number of satellites, sensors, processing, et cetera. And a question that I had, which is, what are the current limitations of the current SAR platforms? Is it revisit rates? Is it resolution? Is it data processing on board? Is it size, weight, power? Is it cost? So maybe if we can, kind of combine this question of what do they look like now, and maybe in 5 and 10 years, what do these constellations look like? I know a lot of them started with microsatellites. Part of that is because of launch costs. Part of that, it's some used off-the-shelf technology more than custom technology. What does it look like now, and where do you all see it going in terms of the technical side? Eric, you want to start with that?
Yeah, sure. So let's see. In terms of constellations, what does that mean? So just the kind of fundamental elements of a SAR constellation relate not only to the number of spacecraft that are up there in space, but also to the ground segment. So you have to have tools in order to control the satellites, to plan collections, to execute those plans, to downlink the data, and then store it and kind of prep it, let's say. And part of that preparation work is down to SAR processing. So you need specific tools to go in and interrogate the raw data that comes off the sensor and then create it into something that's usable. And that thing that's usable can look like an image to us that's typically black and white, high resolution. It can also look like not an image to a computer. It can look like phase data from each one of those pulses. So that's kind of what I think about when I think about SAR constellations.
Okay.
Limitations, it's interesting, a SAR data file is measured in gigabytes. So it's not like one interesting thing about the SAR industry, and again, we kind of think about these data sets being new, and not really new, but really only with the rise of cloud-based storage, cloud-based processing, and cloud-based delivery, which a lot of folks in this room are working on, has SAR data kind of found its way around the community more easily than it has in the past. It used to be that you have to deliver like a SAR file on a hard drive to somebody, like a thumb drive. And now you can, of course, just do it essentially via the internet. And that's, I think, how all of our systems are delivering data. You can essentially go into a portal interface, order what you want, get that tasking collected, and then delivered via the same portal that you then downlink or download to your computer. So I would say what was once a limitation was just data handling, but that's really been I think, largely solved. Now, the reach of access of folks to the data is still something that we're, I think, as a community working on. But I would say on the space side, limitations relate more to power and thermal capacity. There's always that trade-off between, what's the cost of us developing this sensor plus satellite combination? And in order to keep that low, we would like to have a low, or, small swap. Well, small swaps are not great at doing really exquisite class performance. So how do you trade those things back and forth? And I think all of us have found sweet spots. And all of the designs of these that represented here, Capella, ICEYE, and Umbra, we all have different design philosophies with respect to the satellite construction. And that's a good thing. I think that, while you might sit back there and think about us, of course, as competitors, I think that's a great thing. I think the industry needs us to compete,
Right.
not necessarily to build the best SAR thing, but to build a unique SAR approach and have that diversity be available for the community to use. So I think, again, those are just kind of standard engineering trade-offs that all of our companies have to deal with.
Very good. Amy?
Yeah, I don't see, again, I'm probably showing my age, I don't see it as limitations. I remember those days when we didn't have the processing power to handle what SAR could do for us, and now we have that, and I just see that growing exponentially in the future. So again, the part of the question, what do we see happening now is we will be able to continue to leverage the density of that data in ways we had never thought of before, that we never thought possible. Again, the idea of being able to get it to the edge, get it to the furthest point of, again, from a warfighter's perspective, from a national security perspective, how can we get that type of and level of processing to the edge? 10, 15 years ago, that was a dream. Now, it's becoming a reality. So to me, I don't see that we're having limitations. I see just opportunities everywhere, and each of us, we have those sweet spots that we've identified. And what's great is as the demand grows, our companies will continue to evolve and our design and put up the next and the next best and the next best. And this is where all of us are going to be able to benefit from that as the demand continues to grow.
Perfect, thank you. Gabe, you want to lead us out here on the...
Yeah, two things. Size, weight, and power, that question's tough because no matter what you do, there's going to be a trade-off. And so saying that there's like the perfect design doesn't exist. No matter what, you're going to have to trade something off. Is it cost? Is it antenna size? Is it internal power? Like whatever. There's going to be a million trade-offs. You just have to pick the system that's right for you. The second thing in my last 20 seconds is regulatory. Like we will never expand this market if we are continue to be regulated the way that we are. We launched a satellite that we did not have a license for. We had a capability that was below what the license schema was. We're able to receive a license after being on orbit for satellite 2, but there's still constraints in what we can do, like what we want to build and what we can launch. So I think that we really have to have big buy-in from the government.
Very good, thank you. And thank you for all of the questions, everybody. I didn't get to them all, so maybe we can do another one of these sometime soon. But Gabe, Amy, Eric, thank you so much.
Yeah.
And thank you all.